everyone, come back with us. I, Sinta Puspitasari, as the first presenter, and my partner, Sophie Anis Fitriana, as the second presenter. We will present the material about the summative assessment. What is summative assessment? According to Johnson and Jenkins in 2009, summative assessment focuses on what the student has learned at the end of a unit of instruction or at the end of a grade level. For example, Standard 1 and National Test. Covey in 2012 stated that summative assessment are cumulative evaluation used to measure growth after instruction and are generally given at the end of a course in order to determine whether long-term goals have been met. It will be concluded that refers to the assessment of participants and summarizes their development at a particular time, generally taken by students at the end of a unit or semester to demonstrate the sum of what they have or have not learned. In order for a summative assessment to be most effective, there are 5 aspects must be in play. The first is authenticity. A test should examine real-world application. For example, written test in procedure text is less effective than one with story problems or ways to associate the skill outside of the test environment, so the student can easy to remember the ways and comprehend the material to be helpful later in life. The second, reliability. Tests given a summative assessment should hold up in another setting or with another set of students. In other words, the reliability of an assessment implies that consistently produces similar results when given under similar conditions. Standardized tests are an example of assessment meant to be reliable in every setting. The third, volume. Educators should avoid the urge to overtest. Summative assessment should be used only when absolutely necessary to determine the level of learning that has been achieved. The fourth, validity. As closely as possible, testing needs to reflect the objective was taught in a certain period of time. So, the educators should already know learning goals before teaching a particular topic or in a certain time frame. And the last, variety. This factor has perhaps the largest impact on student success in summative assessment. Every student demonstrates his or her knowledge in a specific way, and giving a one-dimensional test can adversely affect individual learners. So the testing should always include cognitive, psychomotor, and affective learning domains. This is the example of summative assessment. The first is written assessment. Students will be tasked with writing an original piece, such as a narrative or analytical essay. Second, performance assessment. With this type, Students will be required to do an activity or task that will showcase their abilities. The third, standardized assessment. Students will take an exam created for a given curriculum and will be measured against existing rubrics shared with the student throughout the course. And the last, oral assessment. Students will craft and deliver an oral speech, such as a speech or presentation. For assessment in a learner-centered classroom, the teachers are not solely responsible for student learning and performance. Instead, students share in the process and take an active role in their education. There are common assessments that used in learning process, formative and summative. Let's take a look at the different both of them. These are differences between formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is the assessment for learning. Meanwhile, in summative, assessment of learning. Formative focuses on the process. In summative, focuses on the outcome. Informative monitors student learning to provide ongoing feedbacks that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching and by the student to improve their learning. Meanwhile, in summative, the goal is to evaluate student learning at the end of instructional unit by comparing it against some sort of standard or benchmark. Informative helps to identify student strengths and weaknesses and the target areas that need work. And then informative help faculties recognize where students are struggling and address problems immediately. And in summative, assess whether the results of the object being evaluated met the stated goal. This is the characteristic of formative and summative assessment. According to the purpose, informative to provide ongoing feedback and adjustment to instruction. But in summative, to document student learning at the end of an instructional segment. When conducted in formative, during instruction and after instruction, but in summative, after instruction. Student involvement. Informative encourage. In summative discourage. Student motivation. Informative intrinsic mastery oriented. In summative extrinsic performance oriented. And then teacher role. Informative to provide immediate specific feedback and instructional correctives. In summative, to measure student achievement and give grades. Learning emphasized. Informative, deep understanding, application, and reasoning. In summative, knowledge and comprehension. Level of specificity. Informative, highly specific and individual. In summative, general and group-oriented. The structure. Informative, flexible, adaptable. in summative, rigid, and highly structured. Impact on learning: informative, strong, positive, and long-lasting. In summative, weak, and fleeting. This characteristic based on Macmillan in 2007. That's all my presentation about summative assessment. The next material will be presented by Sophie Anis Fitriana. Thank you so much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Sophie Anis Fitriana. As the second presenter, I would like to explain the next slide. It's about benefits and limitations of summative assessment. As we know before, summative assessment is an assessment that is carried out after a set of lesson programs is completed. In other words, the evaluation is carried out after the entire learning unit has finished teaching. The main purpose of this summative assessment is to determine the value displayed by students after they run the program for a certain period of time. And there are many benefits and limitations of summative assessment. For the benefits, is necessary for determining students' grade placement, promote students and teacher accountability, provides a means of evaluating instruction activities, and encourage student activity engagement with course material. For the limitations, summative assessment has a tendency for over-reliance on summative measures, and it may promote cheating due to high-level nature of assessment, and it has been fault for promoting learning for the test and do not provide information for correcting errors. There are many examples of summative assessment. There are many forms like final projects, chapter and unit tests, semester tests, standardized tests, college admission tests, and of course evaluation. And there are many examples of form question in summative assessment conclude of fill in the blank and then multiple choice and so on. In summative assessment has an approaches. There are two approaches of summative assessment. Assessment based on absolute criteria and assessment based on relative norm. Assessment based on absolute criteria is if the processing of the evaluation result is based on absolute size or criteria. What must be solved is the percentage of correct answer achieved by each student. And for the assessment based on relative norm is to process evaluation result based on relative norms, standard values such as a scale of 0 to 10 or a scale of 0 to 100 are used. And to change the raw score or a score into an interpreted score based on certain grading scale, there are the steps as follow. The first is arrange the distribution or frequency of scores obtained by students, and then calculating the average number, calculating standard deviations, and change the score into desired rating scale. And this is the example of assessment rubrics. The left side is about the speaking rubric assessment, and The right side is about the writing rubric assessment. For the conclusion, this summative assessment is an evaluation that carried out at the end of teaching programs. This means that the teaching materials that are subject to assessment are quite extensive and numerous. Therefore, it is inefficient if the questions are arranged on the basis of special teaching objectives, such as formative evaluation. However, the preparation of the question must be based on the general purpose of teaching in the teaching programs. Furthermore, because the purpose of summative assessment is to determine the progress rate of each student, which includes determining whether a class increase or passing, then the problem of the difficulty level of the questions must be considered. This means that the question must be arranged in such a way as to cover the easy, the medium, and the difficult one level. Thank you. This is the references took from Brown Douglas and Macmillan, Johnson, and Rohani Ahmad, and there are the Blogspot website. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.